Romeo met Juliet at a party. Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth met at a dance. Sandy and Danny in high school. Harry and Sally in college. But today, we swipe right or left. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Despite our ever greater mobility and even more efficient connectivity, sociologists continue to note that Americans struggle to form lasting, fulfilling relationships of all kinds, especially marriage. We face a very real epidemic of loneliness, one that is, not coincidentally, accompanied by a steady decline in marriage. According to Pew Research, marriage rates have fallen to historic lows over the last 30 years, especially among younger people. At the same time, the typical age at first marriage has climbed to a historic high. Increasingly, Americans who are looking for love can't find it, at least not in the traditional ways, and so they turn online. A new study by researchers at Johns Hopkins University reports that online dating has now replaced the church, family members, and mutual friends as the primary way American couples meet. Now, in no way am I wishing here to knock online dating per se. Many happily married Christian couples began their stories together via an online dating service. I'd suggest online dating is filling a void left as traditional social institutions fail. At the same time, plummeting marriage rates and spiking loneliness rates indicate even our best technologies will never fill the hole left as families, churches, and community become less central together. The loss or decline of core social institutions in recent decades is well documented. Just in my lifetime, extended family, youth clubs, civic organizations, and the church have all become less important to more people than ever before. This seismic social shift is a problem for many reasons, not least of which because these were places and means by which couples used to meet and connect. It's simply impossible to replace such timeless local and embodied ties with apps. In fact, it's no exaggerating that this is even a question of how the next generation will come into being and what will play the central relational roles in their lives. After all, marriage is not a standalone institution. It's part of a social fabric that's tearing apart. As fewer couples get together and form strong marriages, the faster the tear grows and the further apart people drift. Writing at Quillette recently, Mary Eberstadt describes how the decentering of marriage and family has resulted in and reinforced the explosion of sexual and gender identities. Increasingly, young people are forced to answer that basic human question, who am I? Without a mother and father, without siblings, without an extended family or a community or a church body to help them. So many are just left with a letter and an acronym or an adopted sense of historical grievance to center their identities. No wonder, as Eberstadt describes in her book Primal Screams, so many identities today are so meager and so fragile, and the movements that are built around them are becoming more and more unhinged. And yet, this culture of identity and family crisis is a tremendous opportunity for the church, one that's not without historical precedent. As Rodney Stark has observed, one of the reasons that early Christianity grew so rapidly in the 2nd century was that Roman young men turned to the church to find eligible women. The church was full of eligible young women because early Christians had faithfully rescued Roman girls from infanticide and then raised them in their communities. Years ago, I heard Maggie Gallagher suggest that it might be time for churches to kind of get back to this kind of work. While we rescue babies from abortions in both word and deed, perhaps we should also get serious about introducing singles to each other. Perhaps married Christian couples should, meddle a bit more and host some matchmaking dinners. While there's a universally repeated ring by spring joke across every Christian college campus, perhaps marriage opportunism might be a good reason to encourage your son or daughter to attend one. I mean, where else, other than maybe working summer staff at a Christian camp, will young believers be surrounded by so many like-minded peers of the opposite sex? Having spent years watching all this in action, I promise it works. The body of Christ has a unique potential role to play in reversing the decline of marriage and the epidemic of loneliness. If we do, those looking for love may one day open the doors of the church instead of an app. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.